All right, today our topic is stress and how do we manage stress, avoid burnout, and remember to invest in yourself. So I am very excited to have Leslie Biltekoff Myers and Dave Grant join me on the panel today. I'm going to introduce both of them, tell you a little bit about their background, and then we'll share our techniques with you. So
Excuse me one
Les,
second. I just wanted to
yes.
remind Paul to record.
We are recording. We're good.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry.
Perfect. All right. Leslie is a Boston-based customer success executive with deep experience leading post-sales organizations at high-growth software as a service companies, which we'll call SaaS. And she currently works with Series B and C startups where she's responsible for the full customer experience, right? From onboarding and support to renewals and expansion. And previously, she led the global onboarding team at HubSpot and spent over a decade at Google in enterprise sales during a pivotal period of growth in its advertising business. Lots of good stories, I'm sure. And then Dave Grant is here with us as well. And Dave is a seasoned leader in client services with over 2 decades of experience in enterprise software solutions. So as director of client services, he leads a global team focused on Geneva, which maybe you'll have to tell us about, Dave, and related products, because it's probably not the city in Switzerland. Dave prioritizes fostering partnerships with peers in his organizations, as I'm sure we all do. It's across product development, account management, and product management because his goal is to achieve the highest level of success and service and support. He leads from a servant leader mindset, empowering his teams to achieve success. And I noticed we did have a number of new people here, so thank you, Paul, for the introduction, but I can tell you that my passion is solving the challenges of profitable growth at scale while preserving what really matters, your people and your customers. I remember at NeoGov, which was the B2B SaaS company where I worked, when our operational system started breaking under rapid growth, that was really stressful. And I used what I call heart and math leadership, which combines rigorous metrics with human elements that actually drive transformation. And that's when my team conquered those growth challenges. So I knew I was onto something. I've written a book about it, and now I consult with leaders and private equity investors looking for this type of heart and math leadership to achieve 15x returns. So all the work that I do and Leslie does and Dave does and so many of you on this call do goes hand in hand with stress, right? And so today what we want to do is share our techniques for how we manage that stress for ourselves and our teams. We can avoid burnout and invest in ourselves. Leslie, I would like to start with you today. So I'm going to hand the baton over and
Okay.
tell us your tips and techniques.
So Tracey and I had a chance to catch up a little bit before this, and I'm going to go a little personal and share that, for me, it's become a little bit of do as I say, not as I did. So I'm a single parent. I have two teenagers, and we went through a period of a lot of family crisis about a decade ago. That kind of led to me becoming a single parent. And I was working at Google at the time. And I think a lot of us on this call are probably no stranger to chronic stress. And in my case, I was like, it's chronic stress. So I'm just going to push through because it's still going to be there. So what's the point? I'm going to just kind of keep going. I'm going to use work as an escape, as sort of my place of structure. And I'm just going to keep going. And you know what? Honestly, that didn't work out so well. And what I've really learned from that is you have to take a break and sort of refill the tank. And coming back with sort of my own tank refilled, and that looks different for everybody, whether it's time off, whether it's exercise, like that's really going to look different. But I have learned through this that if I can refill my own tank, I'm a better employee, I'm a better leader, and I'm a better parent. So I like to lead by example as a result, and really kind of show my team that this is what they should be doing, and kind of encourage people the way that maybe I wish somebody had during that period of stress in my life. But really, I've found myself in scenarios really pushing people to take a little time off, and sort of say, you have to do this, and you're going to come back stronger. So that's kind of my story from a tactical perspective, I live and die by my calendar. So that for me is like my place of sanity. I'm very transparent as much as possible on my calendar. So that goes through that kind of leading by example. So I have pick up my kids, doctor's appointments, exercise. I like to be really clear on where I am and what I'm doing, with the hopes that those, which is my third thing, is boundaries. I set really clear boundaries for myself. So, I put in a lot of long hours. It's a lot of weekends, but it's when I choose to lean back in, and those boundaries are set for myself. So I focused more on the manage stress and avoid burnout portion of the personal growth.
Leslie, could you share some of the things that you do with your notifications? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yes. So again, I think you have to look at yourself and what works for you. I shared this with a friend of mine, and she said it was her worst nightmare. I have no push notifications on my phone. I have all the apps. I've got Slack. I've got, my email. I've got all of the apps on my phone, but I don't do push notifications. So that way I am not sort of getting the wind knocked out of me when I'm in the middle of something else. And sometimes that actually even includes work meetings. So I'm not getting those notifications that for me are a big source of distraction. It doesn't mean I'm not looking and not looking pretty regularly, but it's when my mindset is ready to look at the email, to look at the Slack. For me, that's a way I can stay focused and sort of create some of those boundaries. And frankly, my team all has my cell phone number. If they really need me, they can find me. It's not that difficult. But I take away the push notifications.
Yeah, I think what I loved about this is that you took control over when other people's emergencies are not your emergencies.
Right.
And that if it truly is, you've got the back door, your team has the secret Leslie bat phone that they could get to you if it was absolutely critical. But I think what it also does is it empowers your team to take care of it themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
My friend who I shared this with said she hated, going into Slack and seeing that 150 notifications. But you're right. Like chances are they figure it out. And if they really do need me, I'm really clear on how to absolutely reach me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Leslie. I appreciate, the focus you had is like, hey, family can cause a lot of stress in what you're going through, and you have to be able to manage that with work. So how do you do the both, and how it didn't work? Because, we learn a lot from what doesn't work versus what does. And so now you're like, I learned this. Now I'm going to do it the other way. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Dave, I want to bring you in, and you can tell us some of the techniques that you've been using.
Yeah, well, I think I included one with my bio, which is not really scalable, and that's that you can pet my dog, which is one of my favorites, but it's probably not something that we can all do. Um, so I work, just for background, because I threw some jargon in my bio, I work at a Fortune 500 company. So it's a big company. I have about 15 direct reports and then some managers. But I learned this actually from one of my directs a little while ago, and it's just something that I've glommed onto as a simple approach and a reminder for myself, which is that it's expectations minus achievement is going to lead to disappointment and stress, right? When that disappointment is resolved or revolving around me, that's oftentimes going to be an indicator of stress, right? So if I'm expecting a salary review, you know, somebody to produce something and it doesn't happen, their achievement is less than my expectation, right? That's going to be that disappointment and that stress. And that is just one of those simple little things that I tuck away in the back of my mind that really uh, leads to normalizing or, being aware of that stress is going to be in there all the time, every day. Um, with my direct teams, I meet with them bi-weekly. And one of the other ways that we bring this up is we talk about roses and thorns in our meeting, right? For those who aren't familiar, it's, rose is a small specific win that you've had, A thorn is a small specific loss. A lot of times those are going to be work related. Could be a client that they helped, could be an internal partner who maybe didn't help them. But just calling it out and acknowledging it, it leads to that normalization and the recognition that stress is a part of our lives all day, every day. That equation is always working. If you want to steal that one, right? That we all have expectations around our own lives, around what other people are going to deliver. Most of the time, that achievement is there, whether it's your own personal achievement or what somebody's delivering to you. But when it's not, that's something to be aware of. And so roses and thorns is something that we built into our team just as that's how we re-engage with each other. Because we are office adjacent, but we do a lot of stuff virtually, much like this meeting. And so it's time we set aside, we go through that, and we just kind of reset and level set. And then and then from there we get on to the real business of working if we need to. I'm gonna piggyback on Leslie's because I love the no push notifications, and that is something that I have as well on my phone. But it reminds me as well of something else that Tracey and I talked about, which was it's technically meditation. Nobody's going to confuse me with a yogi, but I do think it's important to be present, and that's what that no push thing does for me. Is it keeps me from getting distracted by all of the other things that are going on out there. There's a quick meditation that I learned in Little League, which I think is where everybody should learn their meditations. And it was the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For those of you who are familiar with it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is it's basically just a grounding exercise. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, hear, taste, and smell, and you run through your senses. And the idea is really just that as you do that and you name those 5 things, I can see the Zoom, I can see the trees, I can, see the little light on my computer. And you list them all out. You're just getting present, right? It is a totally individual thing, right? You're naming these things, you're putting it out there. Feel like I'm flying along here, but because I have no time in my life, I've also shortened that down to 3, 2, 1. Whatever you need to do, right? I mean, these are the tools that work for me. But I often cut that down to 3 things I can see, feel, and hear. So those are the things that came up for me as I kind of thought about this very relevant topic, not just as it relates to tariffs, but just kind of the ongoing economy that we're in right now.
Yeah, that's great. I like that you have the 3, 2, 1 version. I try to implement something like that. I call it stillness, my stillness moments where I'm just like, okay, just gonna sit still. How many trees can I just look at? The tree's not moving. Okay, I can be the tree. So I call it a meeting with my trees. I schedule a meeting with my trees so that I can just meditate. It's great. And I think there's a lot of power in the clarity of thinking that you get from that. Dave, that was great. Thank you for sharing those good tips. I really like the 3, 2, 1. I'm going to try that one. I said I would give you guys some of my tips. And so I think where I'll start with is kind of I'm going to call it strategic exercise that was an investment during a crisis. The takeaway that I want you to get is that exercise is fuel for clear decision making and resilience during stress, like the techniques that Dave and Leslie shared. But during the first complex company acquisition that I was in, I was traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast every other week. I completely abandoned my exercise routine. And the result was I was exhausted. I was in analysis paralysis. My decision making was subpar. And one day a team member said to me, "God, you look exhausted. When was the last time you did a bike ride?" Because I love to go outdoor cycling. And my routine was I would get up early in the morning and go for an 18-mile bike ride and then go into the office. And I was like, this is a wake-up call. I had completely abandoned my exercise. So I implemented hotel gym workouts. They had a bike in the indoor gym when I was on the East Coast. And then I made a point to make sure that I did my bike ride, which is also a good time for mental stillness. And so what happened is within a week of doing this, my mental stamina was back. My strategic thinking was back. And so I realized the lesson here is that exercise isn't a luxury during high pressure periods. It's essential so that you can have clear decision making and resilience. And I tell my teams this story because I want them to, as Leslie said, model the behavior that I'm doing and do that exercise. And I used it again. Another one, the second one I'm going to share with you is what I call my heart and math approach to overwhelming challenges. And this is how you address emotions and use data to make overwhelming challenges manageable. I had a customer service team at the time, and we were facing a daunting 21-point gap in our customer satisfaction scores from where we were to where we needed to be. And my customer service manager, we'll call him Roy, was dismayed. You look at his face and he looked stressed and he looked overwhelmed, and you could tell by his actions that he was that way, but he wasn't going to talk about it. He's just like, okay, I'm going to have to figure it out, but nothing was happening. And so I wanted to use the heart part of the approach. And that was, let's address the emotions, because your emotions are going to color how you think. And so I talked about the feelings I've experienced and that I've seen others experience when facing challenges that feel daunting. And by acknowledging for him that you name your emotion and what's going on, it becomes a piece of information. And then I manage my inner self-talk. So, oh, I'm feeling afraid that I'm never going to get this done. Okay, well, I'm not going to get it done today, but I could get it done over time. So what if I just broke it down? So how do you manage your inner self-talk? And that's where the data comes in. You can say, how can I use the data to help me slice this, what seems overwhelming, into smaller pieces? And when Roy did this, he actually found 5 different levers that he could potentially use to improve the customer satisfaction score. So he used data to force rank them. And now that he acknowledged, okay, I'm scared about this, but I'm scared because I don't want to get it wrong. But if I break it down into smaller pieces, I could get it right and I could adjust as I went along. And so he force ranked them. He started with the top. He made a change. He gave his team the results, and they started making progress a little bit at a time. And the results of addressing his emotion and knowing what it was and using the data, he took what seemed impossible to him, made it bite-sized pieces, and he became more confident and ultimately achieved the goal. So the takeaway here is if you address the emotions and know what they are, then they don't control you. And then you can use the data to make what seems overwhelming less overwhelming. So those are my 2 tips for the day. And I think what we could do is I hoped we could have a couple of minutes for Q&A. If we've got any Q&A in the chat, or someone could come off chat or come off mute and ask a question. Let's see. I see in the chat that petting dogs is 100% a favorite break. And Leslie, you have some kindred souls in the chat here for no push and setting boundaries. So, any questions anyone has about our tactics? No? All right. Well, then we have more time.
I will add something. I have a presentation with my team tomorrow. I've already added the roses and thorns into that presentation. So we're going to start off with that, Dave.
Brett, that's awesome. I like
Thank
the
you.
I have
roses.
a question, actually.
Yes.
I think that we might be a similar work environment that many times we're working remotely or from home. So leaving stuff at the office when you go home is easier than when you are home and your home is also your office. So, aside from push notifications and things that you are done doing, the tips that you were sharing, which are amazing, what is the cutoff? Is there a specific cutoff? I'm done for the day. I have kids, I have dinner, I have whatever. Or is it, all right, it's 8 o'clock and something's buzzing and whatever, so I'm just going to check in? Or is there a specific that you would recommend, like time that it is no longer work? And that's to anybody on the call. Is there anything that you have where you can just shut it down when your home is your office is your home?
I mean, I'll chime in. For me, teenagers and their commitments make it, they determine my cutoff. So that's one of the things I put on my calendar. For me, that 5 to 7 window, I'm usually driving somewhere. And that's on my calendar. But I will go back on. I think so much of it becomes what works for you as a human, and then sharing that out and being clear about it with your team and saying, like, this is what my day looks like. You're a grown up. I expect the same from you, but being really transparent and communicating around it.
I agree. I did a similar thing, and it would depend on what was going on. Like sometimes I would make an exception to it, but I always tried to have like whatever the family meal time was going to be, that was a cutoff, because then I would change my focus to that team, because that team also needed me to be present. And so once it was there, if there wasn't anything that was super critical, I might just take a peek at it, but then I just put it aside because I knew that I needed to refill my energy so that no matter what that crisis was in the morning, if I looked and there were 15 messages, I'd be like, okay, well, first of all, did any of my team think to solve this themselves? Because I would rather empower them to do that. And I tell them, I expect you to do your best. Like, I'll help you, but do your best. And then I was more prepared and I did better at giving them good guidance. So for me, it was the dinner hour, a check, and then
I'll just tag on to that too. Yeah, I mean, so again, some of this is being at a larger company probably, but I've really focused on building up my international team so that they can take some of that, right? I mean, that's really the short answer. So that, when 5 o'clock comes around, I can say, hey, APAC team, right? We've talked about this. You got this, right? You're all adults, as somebody said a second ago, right? Like, so that really allows me to step away and feel good about it.
Thank you. Great answers.
It was a really good question. Like, when is enough enough? Right. Awesome. Alan, Paul, is it time for breakout rooms? I don't want to jip us off of our great breakout rooms.
I see Maureen, you've got your hand raised, so I don't know if you want to add or if you have a quick question. I can give you guys 2 more minutes before we jump into breakouts.
I'll make it a quick question. I love all of these strategies, and especially may steal heart and math. I too feel a lot of the ways you're saying in managing stress and managing things for people underneath me, but have you experienced it where you're not in a culture that supports these methodologies, or you have leadership above that does not support these, even the ideas that we're allowed to bring our emotions to work, or that those are the realities of being human? Have you experienced any of those conflicts with these strategies for yourselves?
I once had a boss who said, I'd love to run a company where there weren't any people. So he'll be the next one as robots as a service. Yes.
Yeah, right.
So I've been there. And I think a lot of that is, how do you want to manage it within your own team, which sometimes you have that flexibility. You don't always. I had the luxury of, this is how we're doing it. And if you don't like it, okay, I'll go somewhere else. But, I think in that you have to navigate it in a way that perhaps, oh, I've seen this, or I've heard this theory. What are your thoughts about this particular theory, as a way of kind of coming around the edges? Leslie, you were at Google where maybe that wasn't allowed as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually it never happened to me at Google, to be honest. I think there was a lot of night work, but it was a very transparent, open culture. It was one thing I really loved about the organization. I wish I had a great answer. I have had that, and I ultimately left. Because for me, it didn't align with my core value. I fortunately could function otherwise when it came to my team, which is ultimately what was more important for me. But I have run into that, and it didn't line up with the organization I was involved with. Like, I look for that intentionally when I join companies. Transparency, if you haven't picked up on, is kind of one of my core tenets. So, it's something I seek out actively.
Which we can see also works with respect to tariffs, right? Thank you, Jamie. Dave, did you want to add in, or I see Shimon has his hand up?
No, I'm really just agreeing, right? I mean, I think it's you either manage up, manage around, right, for the things you can't control, or you manage down for the things you can, right?
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Shimon.
Shimon,
Shimon.
and I wanted to add to the ones who are in the smaller startups. I don't know about the big companies. I always join startups, but I could say that it's important to state your boundaries. You could do this nicely, but if you don't, they'll step on that. I mean, you could do a lot of this culture checking and see how things are done in the company that you joined, but sometimes you realize only after you join that boundaries are not always respected. And when that happens, it's really important to state your boundaries. And to do that, I highly recommend that what worked for me was actually setting this in a calendar. This is what I'm out, and sometimes if you do this and write a meal with the kids, if someone don't get the hint, you write, dinner or a certain activity, and you write that. And then when people call, if they respect your boundary, they know you're busy, or you could say, is this important? I'm now with a meal, or I'm doing this or that. So if you respect your boundaries, people will respect yours as well. So especially smaller companies, when it's not so evident, and if it's a startup, it's better to put the times of your activities or when you're away in your calendar. My team always did that. It's like between 6 and whatever, 7 to 9, I'm busy, with Oliver, my son, or something, and dinner time or something like that. And then, managers usually look at it and it's like, should I really call or not? And they did that because at the beginning, if people test your boundaries, see what is it important to you or not. So respect your own boundaries, people respect that.
Great thoughts.
All right, Paul, take us to our breakout rooms. Let's go and meet some of our fellow brain trust aficionados.
Well, and also let's give one last applause. Great topic, and thank you for the insights. Hopefully you guys' wheels are spinning a little bit.